All right, it is time for 49ers grades the day after their 33-19 loss to the Baltimore Ravens. You have my article up there on The Athletic. On to the next. That's what Nick Bosa told Brock Purdy. I was in the locker room. Bosa walked right by Purdy's locker over there in the corner that's closest to the tunnel that goes to the field. And he had a very quick message to the 49ers quarterback. And it's one that the people that are overreacting right now should probably heed. On to the next game. It's a week by week league. The analogy remains the same. It's a novel. The season is. Yesterday was a chapter. The chapter didn't go the 49ers' way. They're still Super Bowl favorites. The 49ers are. The Ravens have the second best odds. The 49ers are at the top. And the reason the 49ers are at the top is because yesterday was a turnover-fueled game. And when it's a turnover-fueled game and the 49ers were number one in both the fewest giveaways and number one in both and number one in the most takeaways coming in, you chalk it up to one game and you move on. It was not reflective of a trend yesterday. You could still give the Ravens credit. You could still criticize the 49ers because they obviously didn't come out with their best game. But you can also say it's just one game that hasn't been reflective of a larger trend, and you can move on. And, you know, the best news for the 49ers of the past 7 or 8 days is that Seattle beat Philadelphia on Monday night, giving the 49ers a little extra breathing room. Now San Francisco is favored by 13.5 points against Washington, which seems like a fairly large number, especially considering the fact that this is a short week for the 49ers. But that's what it is. And now the 49ers can move on to try to beat Washington. And I think that game against the Rams in week 18 back at Levi's Stadium is lining up to be a huge one. Probably are going to be major playoff implications in that game, maybe for both teams. And the Rams are playing well, really well with Matthew Stafford right now. In fact, they almost beat the Ravens team that the 49ers saw yesterday. But the 49ers are still favored to win the Super Bowl. I think if they met the Ravens again in the Super Bowl, they would be favored, as they should be. They outgained the Ravens yesterday. They were more efficient than the Ravens yesterday. They had some bad turnovers yesterday. One especially bad one, the first Brock Purdy interception, but then they caught some bad breaks. And that's just how it works in the league. So people need to relax. People need to keep the big picture. Every single time I've talked about the big picture over the past 3 or 4 years, or maybe even more, I've been right? You've been correct when you look back at it. You're like, oh, wow, yeah, maybe this guy wasn't falling. Well, the 49ers have been in a lot worse situations than the one right now. They're coming off a 6-game win streak, and they lost one. So they've won, 6 out of 7. They're still the NFC's number 1 seed. Let's go through the grades. First, for the quarterback position, C-. This was Brock Purdy's worst game, but even though it was his worst game, lazily looking at his interception total, he had 4 interceptions in this one, and just judging him based on that is not productive at all. The first pick was the big problem for Brock Purdy. And, you know, the 40, he's so good with the anticipatory throws. I'll put Shanahan's quotes up there in a little bit, but he throws to a spot, right? Brock Purdy throws to a spot, receiver comes out of his break, football is waiting for him. You got to give the Ravens defense credit for covering spots so effectively yesterday. They got to the spot before the 49ers on numerous occasions. So Brock Purdy, I don't think the 49ers were accustomed to playing that good of a defense. And I told you all week that this was going to be a huge challenge for the 49ers. Historically good matchup between the 49ers and the Ravens. And it just so happened that the 49ers ran into a defense that was playing much higher level football than their previous opponents this season, maybe with the exception of the Browns, right, who are the number 1 defense in the league. But this time the 49ers had a full arsenal. The Ravens got to the spot quicker. Purdy didn't go through enough progression on that first interception where Kyle Hamilton cut in front of Deebo Samuel for the pick. It happens, but it happened at a really bad time. Reminded me a little bit of the Christian McCaffrey fumble against Minnesota. 49ers rolling early. They had a defensive stop on the first drive. They have a chance to score first with a touchdown, right, which gives your odds of winning a huge boost, and they commit a bad turnover. McCaffrey fumbled against Minnesota. That led to a bad domino effect in that game. Purdy threw the interception where he should have progressed a little bit further through his reads against Baltimore yesterday. But you look at the other interceptions, and you just have to give Baltimore some credit. Shanahan not bothered by the other 3. Interception number 2. 49ers, fake run. I think they might have even checked out of the run. It was a screen pass to Deebo Samuel on the near side. You give the corner credit for knocking that pass down, and then he bats it to the other cornerback. That's a hell of a play. It's going, both corners touched the ball on one play. How often do you see that in the game of football? So it's not like it was a bad read on Brock Purdy's part. It was a hell of a play for the Ravens, a deflected interception, and you move on. Interception number 3. I actually don't fully agree with Shanahan here. I do think I mentioned during the game on Twitter that it was a 50-50 ball that George Kittle should have extended his arms for. I think Kittle's letting a few too many of these balls. He's trying to catch them with his body, right? You've got to extend your hands for the football because the corner's going to do that if he's coming in. The defensive back's going to do that if he's coming in from behind, and he'll be able to pop it up in the air if you're not taking advantage of the fact that you have the better positioning to try to make that catch. But you look at the fact that that was a 50-50 football. Shanahan just chalked it up to that and said, oh, it was bad luck. Purdy was trying to make a play. I think that, and Brock admitted to seeing flags on the field. I think that in that case, you just have to don't throw a 50-50 ball in that case, right? Because there's going to be very little upside to play like that if your team is already going to be penalized. I think it was obvious that the penalty flags were against the 49ers in the backfield because Purdy was scrambling around. He was showing a lot of quickness on the play. He was showing his elusiveness on the play. Unfortunately for the 49ers, it ended in an interception, but it wasn't like the first one where he just misread the coverage and blew a touchdown by throwing it to Kyle Hamilton. It was a 50-50 ball that got knocked into the air, and the Ravens, playing good physical coverage, made a nice play. Interception number 4 was really, really emblematic of the 49ers' offensive line issues, and their offensive line is going to get a D. Colton McKivitz, he just got, I mean, Colton McKivitz got, by Patrick Jones, a defensive tackle who was working against the end, got backed into Brock Purdy. And he hit, Purdy's arm got hit as he was trying to throw to Christian McCaffrey. It was the right read. The 49ers offensive line gave up big pressure, and Kyle Shanahan was not upset at his quarterback for that. I mean, it's a team effort, right? You have to look across the full spectrum of things. So in the case of Brock Purdy, he made a lot of explosive intermediate throws. Brandon Ayuk had some nice catches. George Kittle early on, the 2 intermediate crossers. Ayuk caught a really nice one from Purdy on a deep out early in this game. It was a matter of eliminating the giveaways for the 49ers. That's what they needed to do to make yesterday's performance more efficient. I thought Jeff Deeney had a great start, great stat here on Pro Football Focus. Look at the intermediate passes for Brock Purdy yesterday. 9 of 11, 215 yards. The interception is the play I'm talking about. Kyle Hamilton early. That was, I think, the worst throw of the game for Brock Purdy. But it's the short passes that the Ravens were truly sitting on. When I say that they're sitting on spots when they were there to take away any anticipatory throwing from Brock Purdy, that's what caused San Francisco trouble yesterday. And Purdy had been very efficient on the short passes. He remained relatively efficient, minus the 1 interception on the intermediate balls yesterday. But I've always illustrated that the short game is what has to be on point. And from a play calling perspective, from a chess match perspective against Mike McDonald and the Ravens defense, the 49ers were behind yesterday. There's no way around it. And if they face this Baltimore team again, the 49ers will have a chance to win the chess match. They'll have a chance to make adjustments. How do you do better on those short throws? Well, Purdy's going to have to go further down his progression list. There's nothing wrong with the run-pass balance yesterday. The 49ers ripped off several big plays. They just have to hold on to the football, and then they have to control the short game so that they can run a little bit more. And if they do go a little bit further through their progression list, which I'm sure they will if they have to counteract the Ravens moving forward, and hey, the Ravens blueprint is going to be at least other teams will attempt to take it moving forward. The 49ers will have a chance to take that counter adjustment offensively and make sure that they still continue doing what has led them to be the number 1 offense in the league, but make those anticipatory throws against teams that are trying to take away the first and the second read. Again, this is just one regular season game. We've seen performances like this one happen to a lot of high-powered offenses in the divisional round of the playoffs. I still remember the 2018 Rams, right? They were looking good all year long. Then they get to, or this was the 2017 Rams, actually. 2018 Rams made it to the Super Bowl where it happened to them against the Patriots. But 2017 Rams looking good all season long. They get to the playoffs. I think it was Atlanta that beat them at the Coliseum. And it wasn't pretty. Atlanta figured out they cracked the code, and the Rams, because they didn't execute in a do or die game, their season was over. So it's a lot better for this to happen to the 49ers in week, what was it, 16? Yeah, week 16, than in the playoffs. And they're going to be able to make some of the anticipatory adjustments that they're going to need to make moving forward. And I think that they're fully confident in somebody like Brock Purdy being able to read a defense, go through one more progression. That's what Brock Purdy excels at. We're talking about his strength here, and he's going to have to showcase his strength in the adjustments that he makes. But it wasn't like the 49ers were devoid of productive plays yesterday. They still did make plays downfield in this football game. Moving on to running back, we're going to give Christian McCaffrey a B in this game. The reason that I give McCaffrey a B and not an A, and he had a really good game running the football at 18 carries, over 100 yards. He's right at his career high now that he set with Carolina in 2019. I thought that there was some missed pass protection, especially one on fourth down where McCaffrey was not able to execute a good block and pass pro, and then Purdy had to go with like the over the head, behind the back desperation toss to McCaffrey. So the 49ers protection in general just wasn't good yesterday. It was compromised by a really good Ravens front. McCaffrey, though, probably the 49ers' best offensive skill position player. Ayuk also did a good job for the 49ers, but nothing. But nothing was perfect for this team, just like this broadcast that just cut out right now. Still doing better than the live that I had to do after the game that wasn't connecting to the Wi-Fi over at Levi Stadium at all. I'm going to have to use cellular data next time around. Anyway, let me get my screen back up here because I just lost my share screen. Boom. There we go. Brock Purdy split C minus, B for McCaffrey, B minus for George Kittle. Like I said, the tight end position, there were some missed blocks by everybody yesterday, but Kittle, he's got to extend his arms on the 50-50 ball that came in there in the second quarter. You have to win contested catches. And he dropped one earlier, too. There was a beautifully thrown corner pass from Brock Purdy to George Kittle, who had beaten his defender. Wasn't open by much, but it was a catch he should have made downfield. We're going to give the tight ends a B minus. We'll give the receivers a B. Holding call a little bit later in the game downfield. I believe that was on Brandon Ayuk trying to block downfield, using a little bit too much of his arms. You want to use the arms to catch. You don't want to use them to block. That one hurt the 49ers. Overall, again, this team was decently explosive yesterday. The 49ers had, for much of the game, were near 9 yards of play. I think they probably finished around 8, maybe a little bit less than that. They outgained the Ravens. They were more efficient than Baltimore, but the turnovers happened, and the offense just was a little bit disjointed. It wasn't able to get into its full rhythm, and it's something that you could very reasonably believe would be corrected if they got to play Baltimore again, which is why the 49ers remain the Super Bowl favorite. It's the offensive line that gave up a lot yesterday, and the 49ers ended this game leaking oil up front. Colton McKivitz was the left tackle by the end of the game, thanks to Trent Williams' groin injury. Ben Barch was the 49ers left guard by the end of this game, thanks to Aaron Banks' toe injury. Brendel stayed healthy. He was at center, but Spencer Burford, the right guard, had to move out to right tackle, and Burford started giving up a lot of pressure, especially to Jadeveon Clowney there at the end. I mean, the fact that 49ers rallied was rather remarkable to me, and Baltimore looked really, really relieved after this game was over. After they finally stopped the 49ers when it was a 33-19 game and the 49ers had gotten to the 1 yard line. Baltimore looked really relieved, even though the 49ers had been able to march all the way down with the offensive line setup that I talked about. Burford hadn't repped at tackle since he was at San Antonio, and he's already been in the NFL for 2 seasons. Barch is somebody that the 49ers picked up off of Jacksonville's practice squad just about a month and a half ago or so. So, I mean, you look at what the 49ers were dealing with at the end, the fact that they rallied with Sam Darnold after Brock Purdy left with the stinger. They showed some nice fight, right? But at that point, the game was a very low probability situation for the 49ers. The offensive line was giving up way too much pressure. They weren't able to get pushed there at the end with the reserves in the game. But even, before the reserves entered, you see all the pressure that McKivitz was allowing over the right side. That was a big, big problem. The Ravens were getting pressure with 4. Now, this is a Baltimore team that leads the NFL or entered leading the NFL with 50 sacks. They obviously got a few more against the 49ers, so they're still in the NFL lead. We know that the 49ers' weak spot is on the right side of the offensive line. That weak spot did show up against the Ravens yesterday. And, it caused at least one of those Brock Purdy interceptions on the third pick that he threw that was batted into the air on the Kittle 50-50 ball. There was also pressure from Baltimore, and they were getting a lot of pressure with just 4 men in this game. And the offensive line is going to have to be better. If anything, I would say the offensive line was the biggest culprit for the 49ers yesterday in their issues if you go back and look at the tape. And that has been the weakness of this team so far this year. Straight drop pass protection has been an issue. Brock Purdy's overcome it for almost all the season. He's still the most efficient quarterback in the NFL this year. Yesterday, obviously, did not overcome it, with probably the low light play being McKivitz getting beaten on the pressure there by Patrick Jones, 98 on the right side. Hits Brock Purdy, throws the interception. That was the 4th pick at the start of the second half. All right, and 2 touchdowns in 18 seconds for the Ravens there in that stretch in the second half that really gave them some distance over the 49ers. Defensive line, and if I'm just going to spoil the defensive grades right now, all of them right here. Linebackers, defensive backs, basically C's across the board. The defense started decently for the 49ers. They were holding the Ravens the field goals and not touchdowns, and then they tired out. Then the offensive turnovers put them on the field too much. Then Lamar Jackson really started to get out of the pocket and run, which was good for him because I don't think that Jackson started this game accurate at all from the pocket. So once he reverted, and I wrote about this, once we saw Lamar Jackson revert to what we had seen so much of him from him over the past years coming into this game, to that running quarterback moving around outside the pocket. I'm thinking about that throw on the move to Gus Edwards, who had split out of the backfield. That was one of the daggers there in the second half, coming off of a 49ers turnover. Once that happened, the 49ers just weren't in position to snuff the Ravens out. They're really missing Eric Armstead in that interior run defense right now. You think about the 4th down at the start of the game or earlier on in the game where the Ravens scored their first touchdown. It was, I think, Deommodore Lenoir giving up a few too many extra yards to Isaiah Likely, the tight end, and Likely got to the 1-yard line on 3rd and 10. And because of that, Gus Edwards was able to go, John Harbaugh went for it on 4th down. Gus Edwards scored. The 49ers were a little bit soft on the interior. Just one great from the 49ers. I still remember the end of the first half where you had, I think, 3 and long situations for the Ravens, and they converted all of them, including the 3rd and 16 where Jackson scrambled for 30 yards. Wasn't good contained by the 49ers defensive lineman, and then Fred Warner just got juked out of his pants. So Jackson made plays. You give him credit. I had talked so highly of Jackson over the entire week leading into the game, right? I was talking about how well he was throwing from the pocket. Everybody knows how fast Lamar Jackson is. And that the 49ers would have had to keep that in check. And for the most part, they did, except for that one 3rd and 16 play. But that came in such a big spot because they couldn't get the ball back at the end of the first half. There's a domino effect of that kind of stuff. The Ravens got it back with about 3 minutes to go in the first half. Kyle Shanahan loves possessing the football at the end of the first half, and he couldn't possess it because Ambry Thomas had a bad holding penalty. Over 100 penalty yards for the 49ers. I remember Tashawn Gibson had a penalty earlier in this game, a pass interference penalty that extended a drive. Gibson had a face mask that extended a drive. But Ambry Thomas's penalty there on that 2-minute drive for the Ravens set up the another first down for Baltimore. And then they had the 3rd and 16 where Jackson took off and ran, and the 49ers could never get the ball back. And finally, Justin Tucker kicked the field goal before halftime. But think about the opportunity cost for the 49ers, right? If they would have stopped the Ravens on one of those and long situations, they would have gotten the ball back before half. They would have had a chance to run more plays to tire out Baltimore. They would have had a chance to freshen up their defense instead of their defense getting gassed there at the end of the first half. And maybe the 49ers even kick a field goal of their own. So it was at least +3 for Baltimore, but it could have been a 6-point swing if the 49ers had scored going the other way. Maybe even the 49ers could score a touchdown there, make a bigger swing on the scoreboard. But just the fatigue factor and the momentum factor heading into the locker room started to skew the Ravens' way when the 49ers could not defensively finish out that first half. And then by the second half, the giveaways really started to pile up, and you could tell that the defense started to tap out for the 49ers. That being said, I've got the linebackers as a C here. I talk about the miss from Fred Warner. I think they had 6 missed tackles, which was better than normal. It was special teams where the 49ers had a ton of missed tackles, but Warner had a nice pass breakup that allowed the 49ers a chance in that last gasp effort. They stopped the Ravens on 3 and out at 33-19. Obviously, though, San Francisco couldn't punch the ball in. And I guess when I grade the quarterbacks, talk about Sam Darnold, made some nice throws, but also took a sack that wasn't good there on 3rd down. And then the 4th down interception was just a desperation play. I still look at the offensive line, though, especially once the 49ers had McKivitz at left tackle, Barch at left guard, and Spencer Burford, a guard playing tackle. It was just a mess by the end of this game. Good news for the 49ers, though. Jason Verrett played 5 snaps for this team. They wanted 4 to 8 snaps for Verrett. I talk about the bad penalties in the secondary. A couple of those went against Ambry Thomas, who also made a nice open field tackle. Have to mention that early in this game on a 3rd down in the red zone against the Ravens. But ultimately, the 49ers just want to get better and better on the back end. And Jason Verrett has proven to be a Pro Bowl type of player when he's healthy. If he can get back to that level of conditioning and that level of quickness, that remains to be seen. But the 49ers obviously believe in him. They called him up from the practice squad yesterday. They gave him the 5 snaps when they planned to give him 4 to 8. He did give up the touchdown to Nelson Aguilar. I believe that was the last Baltimore touchdown of the game. But by and large, I thought that was a good debut performance from Jason Verrett. It was a show of perseverance after, all those season-ending injuries and the Achilles tear last year. The 49ers are going to be working Jason Verrett back into the mix, and they're going to hope that him back there, maybe at nickel, allows you a little bit more flexibility. You've got to cut down on the penalties that happened yesterday on the back end. And it just, it was a bleh performance from the 49ers defense. It's just not really worth belaboring and zooming in and being all too granular about what happened in this game. That's why I led my article with the headline "On to the next," the quote from Nick Bosa to Brock Purdy. It's one of those games that didn't go the 49ers way against a really good team. I think that there is a sense of a letdown from the outside because there was so much hype and MVP implications, and we'll see how that all sorts itself out. There's still 2 more weeks to go in the season. It obviously would have been an awesome chance for Brock Purdy to deliver a pseudo closing statement, but there still is football left to be played. Lamar Jackson still has to play 2 games. Purdy still has to play 2 games. It's going to be Purdy against Stafford in all likelihood in week 8, and Stafford's been week 18, and Stafford's been playing really well for the Rams. So let this all sort out. We can track it on a week-by-week basis, but at this point, the 49ers, all they care about is that they remain the Super Bowl favorite, and they want to turn up the Jets moving forward into Washington. So that's a quick look at the grades for the 49ers. Not great. It is what it is. They're still in control of their destiny for the number 1 seed, and overreactions really don't make a whole lot of sense at this point. Short week. They're getting ready for Washington coming up on the East Coast. It's going to be cold. That is on Sunday. So I'll talk to you soon. Got a lot more content coming today. Talk to everybody in just a bit.